So in this video, we're going to cover different types of pathogens and talk about themes of the immune system that we will be covering and seeing in a lot of the videos. So this first video is about pathogens. The immune system has evolved to recognize and remove, hopefully, control the reproduction of pathogens in our bodies. What do we mean by pathogens? Well, we typically talk about four groups of pathogens, the first being viruses. Now, this isn't a virology course, but we will talk about specific viruses throughout the course. Most of the time, we'll just talk about a general virus. And when I talk about a virus and draw them throughout this course, I'm drawing this little sort of hexagon with a spiky thing. Not all viruses look like that under the microscope, but in general, that's how I will draw a virus in my videos. Viruses can infect different parts of the body. They can replicate in different cell types. So our immune system has to be able to defend against all these different types of viruses. They look different. They have different molecules on their surface. They replicate in different parts of the body. So the immune system has evolved to be present in a lot of different places and have a lot of different mechanisms to recognize pathogens, like viruses. And here are some examples of viruses that you'll see here. And you'll notice things like, viruses that infect your respiratory tract, like coronaviruses, viruses that can infect your GI tract, like poliovirus, viruses that can infect your skin, like papillomaviruses. Again, lots of different types of viruses. This isn't really a virology course, but we will talk about specific viruses. But in general, we'll talk about a general virus and how an immune system might recognize a general virus. Not every immune system mechanism recognizes every virus the same. So there will be some caveats on how the immune system recognizes viruses. But that's our first group of pathogens. The second group of pathogens are bacteria. So bacteria are living organisms, as opposed to viruses, which require entry into our cells to replicate. A bacteria can replicate on their own. This is how I typically draw bacteria, this sort of rod-shaped structure. And again, from taking a course like microbiology, we've learned there are many different types of bacteria. They can infect different parts of the body. So the the immune system has to be able to recognize pathogens like bacteria in different parts of the body with different molecules on their surface, recognize them and remove them from the body. And again, we'll talk about some specific bacteria, but in general, we'll just talk about, well, this is how the immune system recognizes a bacteria in general. It might not always be the case for specific bacteria, but again, we're going to talk in generalities throughout this course. The other two types of pathogens, which we don't focus too much on, are fungi and parasites, but we will talk about them a little bit throughout the course. Fungi, as you know, are eukaryotic organisms. They have membrane-bound organelles, things like yeast. Right? Prokaryotes are different than eukaryotes. Prokaryotes, bacteria. Eukaryotes, fungi. So we can have fungal infections, eukaryotic infections, these single-celled organisms, like Candida or Saccharomyces or Aspergillus or Pneumocystis. So these can be called fungal infections. And again, they can be in different parts of the body. They can be in the skin. They can be in the lungs. So the immune system has to be able to recognize fungi as well. The fourth group of pathogens are parasites. So those are usually more complex eukaryotic organisms. They can be multicellular or unicellular. Organisms that cause things like malaria, the Plasmodium pathogen, or Leishmania, protozoa. In general, they tend to be more complicated eukaryotes than just single-celled fungi. We also have more multicellular organisms like nematodes, roundworms, schistomiasis. So the immune system has to be able to identify these multicellular organisms as well. It's a little more challenging to identify fungi and parasites because they're eukaryotes. We are also eukaryotes. So the immune system has developed mechanisms to try to distinguish between our cells and cells like fungi and parasites, which can look similar to our cells. But those are the 4 different types of pathogens we're going to talk about throughout the course, and that the immune system has evolved to recognize and hopefully remove from the body. Because all of these types of pathogens, if they infect us and they were allowed to reproduce uncontrollably, they would damage the organs and tissue and lead to death. So, here we go. Throughout the course, I want to introduce 3 themes that we're going to see. And as you watch videos, as we talk about topics, I want you to keep in mind these 3 different themes, because you're going to see them throughout the course. The first theme is recognition. The immune system has to be able to recognize that this thing in the body doesn't belong here and is harmful. So we have evolved immune cells, that have immune proteins that can act as recognition molecules for pathogens. And again, we just talked about lots of viruses, lots of different bacteria. So we have evolved lots of complicated mechanisms to recognize a pathogen. So as we're learning about different immune cells and immune proteins, I want you to keep in mind, okay, is this protein involved in recognizing a pathogen? And if so, how does it recognize the pathogen? So here I've drawn some proteins either on the surface of a cell. We'll find proteins living on the surface of our cells. We call those things receptors typically, cell surface receptors. We might also find our immune system proteins floating outside of a cell in our liquids, in our humors. So those might be soluble proteins. So as you keep track of all the proteins, we're going to learn many human proteins in this course, you have to keep track. Are these proteins found in our membranes that are sticking out, cell surface receptors, or are these proteins floating in our humors, floating in our fluids? We're also going to find proteins that are inside the cell, intracellular proteins, because pathogens can be inside our cells. So again, we need to be able to recognize that. So throughout the course, you're watching the videos, think about recognition molecules. And we will talk about autoimmune disorders where the immune system accidentally recognizes our self molecules and attacks our bodies. So it's important for the immune system to distinguish between self and non-self, and sometimes it doesn't do that very well. Okay. The second theme we're going to see throughout the course is referred to as effector mechanism or effector function. That refers to, okay, the immune system has recognized this pathogen. Well, now we need to stop the pathogen from replicating. We need to disarm the pathogen. We need to destroy the pathogen. So effector mechanisms refer to the mechanisms by which the immune system neutralizes a pathogen, prevents it from replicating, possibly even destroys it. And again, there are many different effector mechanisms because there are many different types of pathogen that can be present in many different locations of the body. The third theme we're going to see throughout the course is communication. If an immune system cell or protein recognizes an infection, it really should be alerting lots of other mechanisms in the body to sort of protect and defend, not just locally, but systemically all over the body. So we're going to learn about immune cells and processes where cells can recognize the infection and actually communicate either locally or distantly throughout the body that there's a pathogen here, so we should be putting the body in a antiviral or antibacterial state. We should produce more immune cells. We should produce more immune proteins to attack and defend this pathogen. So we're going to learn about molecules called cytokines, which are these small proteins that typically are released from immune cells. They can be also released from other cells, and they will travel either locally or distantly throughout the body to communicate with other cells and other tissues to put this to respond to the pathogen even more. So as we again go throughout the course, or you watch the videos, I will be referring to these, and you should be thinking about, okay, is this a recognition mechanism? Is it an effector mechanism? Or is this a communication mechanism? And what are the results of them? So that's all I have for this video. Nice work.